music is something loud. One moment. Hi all, this is Aki from Bring Forth. This is either set 53 part 2 or set 54 part 1. And based on my recording cycle, I would say this is 53 part 2. And I've been asked by somebody called Brannon, one of my friends, to do a little bit of an explanation about the law of one and what it is and what its core philosophies and so on are. He has been asked by his school teacher to do a presentation on the law of one, or specifically do an anthropological study of another religion, and then make a report about it, write an essay. Now, it's 4 o'clock in the nighttime, so I apologize for not wearing a t-shirt, and I hope my nudeness does not come into play here, because I understand that the culture regarding certain things like nudity and farts in the USA is quite different than it is over here, so I apologize if my appearance offends you, but it is not meant to do so. Now, like I said, my name is Aki Greus, and I live in Finland, Helsinki, and I've been an adherent to the law of one for close to 2 decades now, give or take, and I'm going to be answering questions that he writes into the chat thing while I sit here doing the recording. Now please keep asking questions. And I'm going to be on the chat here and talk with him while I do this answer thing. The first question is, what are the core philosophies of law of one? It's a belief that the entire universe is a single creature that's self-sentient. In essence, kind of a pantheist or perhaps an animist religion. Animist in the sense that all life is an individuated life. It's not an individual life, but it's an individuated life. Meaning that it's not actually independent, but it is given the illusion of free will that it chooses to follow, perhaps. At the highest level, life becomes self-aware, or perhaps God is the right word. Every life form develops to become God, and the universe is God that out of its own boredom splits itself, or perhaps interest in evolution, splits itself into many and experiences the universe for itself. In essence, in the law of one, we believe that the universe is a self-sentient being, and it can't really evolve without the illusion of other selves, because there is only one God, and that is the God that is God. And the only way that God can experience others and other selves is to have an illusion of other selves. So the only way to have an illusion that is a believable illusion is to actually exist in the illusion and lose something if you make a mistake in the illusion. So, in short, it's a religion centered around evolution. It says that we evolve to become God, and we go through these steps. These steps are called densities, and that is because the denser life is, the more aware life is. And in the view of the law of one, we advance through these densities and then become eventually the density of everything, because we are so dense that we become everything. This is kind of like believing that a black hole is the end result of all evolution. But in the law of one, we believe that a black hole is not the densest object in the universe. We believe there are more denser objects yet to be found, but it is, for current understanding, quite dense. So there isn't all that much to say. It's not a very complex religion. There's the veil, which we talk about here, which is the belief or perhaps the reality that we are in the illusion of being other selves. We are not talking about the Islamic veil of hiding the face, we're talking about the veil of illusion, or the veil of reality. On the next density, the veil diminishes and vanishes of its own will, and we become either a society that recognizes everything as God and tries to love everything, or we become a society that tries to understand itself as God and love itself more than everything else. These are the two alternative paths. These are called either service to self or service to others. Now, service to others is of course impossible in a reality where you don't believe that others are real. So to get to that level, you have to understand that you are God creating reality, and therefore the illusion of the other self is as important as the reality of the other self's non-existence. So, in essence, we believe that all life follows either one of these paths, and at the end of it, it becomes one with the other path, so that you have to learn in the end to become the other path. In our view, no creature has ever reached sixth density, or the halfway point between sixth density and seventh density to be exact, while being service to self, because the pressure to realize that you are alone and that you must love other selves increases as you increase in densities, and eventually you reach the density where you understand that since other selves are you, you can't do harm to them without doing harm to yourself. My apologies. I'm suffering from a disease. Now, without going further into the particulars of the disease I'm suffering from, you can all figure out what it is at this point. I'd like to continue with the Law of One. So, in short, it's a religion centered around evolution. Either you evolve yourself and ignore others, or you evolve yourself through others. You understand that others are a mirror that doesn't exist, but it's good that we believe that it exists. It exists only while you are in the illusion of you existing. So, the next question is, what is Law of One? Law of One is two things. It's the belief itself that we are all a single creature, that we are, as I explained, and all the beliefs in there. And it is also a book series by an author called Carla. And I'm going to have to check the actual name because I don't remember these things quite as well, even though I'm an adherent to the religion. So it's Carla Rueckert, and Don Elkins and Jim McCarty. They were the original channelers of the Law of One. The Law of One book was written in the 60s, and it's done in an altered state where they have the situation where one of these people, Carla, goes into this trance-like state and lies on this bed and meditates into an altered state of consciousness, and then kind of is taken over by this entity called Ra, which these other two individuals ask questions of. And eventually the religious idea of what Ra wants, what is Ra's, as in the Egyptian sun god, what is Ra's opinion, what does it actually strive for? And the book series discussing this interview process is called The Law of One. And it's 106 chapters long, and it's about perhaps 50 pages. It's 5 small books, 50 A4s. And they cover many topics. They go from human sexuality to drug abuse to conspiracies about aliens to conspiracies about governments having UFO technology and so on. They cover all of these modern events and have through them an understanding of what Ra wants. They don't just discuss ancient Egypt. They try to discuss modern things and ask this God being of what it wants. Ra gives a lot of historical information about what Egypt was like and gives a few details about electromagnetic physics that have been only recently verified, such as structures of the pyramid and its purposes and so on. These informations were given in the 60s and they are only now being found to be true. And one of the most common of these things, or the most discussed, is the fact that the pyramids seem to act like funnels of energy. They seem to influence the electromagnetic field around them in a way that is difficult to understand. This is, according to Ra, their actual design. They are designed to be initiation chambers, and they were designed to be shamanistic training centers for religion, philosophy, healing, group work, and so on. So, in short, Law of One is two things. It's a book, and it's a religion. They go by the same name. It's a religion about the universe being one creature, and it's a book series written in the 60s about an interview with a god being that seems to perpetuate the belief that the universe is one being. Now, they ask a lot of questions of Ra about modern historical and historical people themselves and who is on what density and so on. And Ra almost, I wouldn't say almost always, but very often refuses to answer these questions because it would infringe upon our free will. I believe this is called the law of confusion, meaning that while the universe is in its form of plasma cosmology, or the feel that it is a single being generating these artifacts of not being a single being, as long as it's in that state, the law of confusion is what holds true. The next question is, what is the history of the Law of One? Law of One was written in the 60s by those three original adherents, and since then it's split into many groups. Others have tried to channel Ra and have claimed that they channel Ra or similar beings or the same being itself. And Ra has said quite clearly in the original document that it won't be channeled again, or more precisely that the channeling group that originally channeled it is told not to channel it outside of those very strict conditions, and it says those conditions are very unlikely to be found again, and clearly points to the fact that there probably shouldn't be another book or another opinion of them written. So the original book is quite strong in its authority, but in closing to this authority, there are other factions of the Law of One outside of these original factions. And the current leading Law of One site, or where people migrated on the internet, is called Bring Forth. It's a euphemism about the fourth density, which we are advancing into, and about the concept of advancing into the future, or to bring things into reality. So it's a pun. So the Law of One was a fairly prominent ideology during the hippie era of the 60s, and it has since then survived. Its adherents are plentiful, though perhaps not in the order of some of the hippie movement numbers. They don't number, as far as I know of, in the millions, but they do have tens of thousands of followers, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of followers. So it's a fairly small synergetic shamanistic religion, or even an animistic religion, or even a pantheistic religion. And the history isn't that remarkable. It's fairly simple. The original writers tried to discuss things during their own era, and those discussions happened mostly in their own era, and they since then migrated to the internet, where they are currently holding their webpage, and they sell books about the Law of One, and they occasionally appear in the public eye. The book series ended when one of the original writers killed himself. He shot himself in the head after a difficult period. He was depressed and started to have basically visions, and they were trying to help him, but they couldn't, so he in the end took his own life. And that is very sad, but very common in the spiritual community, because people cannot stand the heat. It is hard to be a minority religion during a time where the majority religion clearly says that witches shouldn't be allowed to live. It is hard. There haven't been many other major historical points, because it's still a fairly new ideology or religion. And the main point is when the second group split and started to do channelings of Ra and similar beings without basically the approval of the original group. And the second group is called Cassiopeia. They say that the spirit or the direction of the energy moved from the Ra's original star system to the direction of Cassiopeia, and they believe that the spirit is the same, but from the point of view of many adherents, the Cassiopeia group seems to be very interested in politics and having their own voice heard, while the initial Law of One group is very clearly told by Ra that one should not count numbers. If you have one person who believes in you strongly, it is the same value as 1,000 believing in you strongly, because we are essentially generating the universe in our own beliefs. So if one person believes in you strongly, there is the very easy option of, with that one person, generating a universe that believes in you strongly. So you shouldn't perhaps polarize or spread your religion for the sake of spreading your religion. You should spread it for the sake of understanding or loving someone more. These are the two choices: either the direction of light or understanding, or the direction of love or love. These are the two basic choices. Those who love information or knowledge or understanding eventually evolve to the next level by being service to self. And those who love love just for the sake of loving love develop in the direction of service to others. So from the point of view of Ra, who is a service to other being, it is clearly not a smart move to try to spread your religion simply for the sake of spreading your religion. The next question is, how did Law become of one? That is a difficult question. It's basically the same question of why did God exist in the first place? We believe that when all matter in the universe is compressed to a single point, that is simply God. That has always existed and will continue to exist. It is simply a matter of, if you spread everything in the universe outside the light cone and make sure that they can never touch you and you can never touch them, whatever remains in the universe becomes God. That single point of matter or quantum foam becomes God. So, in essence, the law became one when we realized as the single being that being a single being is scary and boring. We need others through which we can experience ourselves because we need mirrors, we need an understanding of other selves. So perhaps the law was made incarnate when we decided to believe that there are other selves by giving them the power to believe that our self is a transitory thing, when we believe that we evolve, because as we evolve we will become another being, and therefore our illusionary self will vanish and our illusionary past and future will vanish, but the only way to make sure that something remains is to have other selves that evolve on their own. So even the illusion of the other self evolving on its own is an illusion, but it is a comforting illusion. So what are the core philosophies of the Law of One? I'm going to take a 5-minute break and go for a smoke and be back. message from someone. I'll check it before I continue. So to continue, what are the core philosophies of the law of one? The law of confusion, or I think I may get some of these wrong. The law of confusion, or what you would commonly call the law of free will. Actually, I might want to check these online. One moment. Law. I will read a few quotes from the book. There is only one law, that is the law of one. Other so-called laws are distortions of this law, some of them primal and most important for the progress to be understood. However, it is well that each so-called law, which we call way, be understood as a distortion rather than law. There is no multiplicity in the law of one. They mean distortion in the same way that free will or individuality is a distortion of the fact that we are just the one being. So they don't mean distortion in the sense of an evil distortion. They mean in the sense that it's a distortion from there being just one being, or in other words, reality, to us at least. There are several other laws that they lay out in the book, and I'm looking for them here. Here's another quote. In your illusion, all the experiences spring from the law of free will or the way of confusion. In another sense, which we are learning, these experiences are this distortion. Here is the quote I was looking for. This is a bit lengthy. Then if an individual is totally informed with respect to the law of one and lives and is the law of one, such things as building pyramids by direct mental effort would be commonplace. Is that what I am to understand? Am I correct? You are incorrect in that there is a distinction between individual power through the law of one and the combined or societal memory complex mind, body, spirit understanding of the law of one. Mind, body, spirit means basically what it reads as. There is the body and the mind and the spirit. The body and the mind together create the spirit, and the spirit and the body and the mind together, when it realizes that it has the desire to be evolving or perhaps changing itself, it becomes complex, and in other words, it generates the veil. In the first case, only one individual, purified of all flaws, could move a mountain. In the case of mass understanding of unity, each individual may contain an acceptable amount of distortion, and yet the mass mind could move mountains. The progress is normally from the understanding which you now seek to a dimension of understanding which is governed by the laws of love, which seek the laws of light. Those who are vibrating with the law of light seek the law of one. Those who are vibrating with the law of one seek the law of foreverness. We cannot say what is beyond this dissolution of the unified self with all that there is, for we still seek to become all that there is, and still we are raw. Thus our path goes onward. So, in short, those are the laws. And basically, that is all for the core philosophies. We are all one being trying to make itself into many beings so that it can be a better one being. So we all evolve and the one being evolves. That is perhaps the core philosophy. I would also like to point out that the law of one is fairly against drug use. It it has said in its basically core version that the use of drugs such as LSD generates holes in the auric field, and I should point out that the belief in the aura is one of the core philosophies, or the belief in the spiritual body or the electromagnetic body of humanity is one of the core beliefs. So we all have our electromagnetic field, which we generate by basically being here. We have a physical body that is made of electromagnetism, basically, and you can perceive it with your eyes, and then as you become more aware, you can perceive things like radiation, radio waves, and so on, and eventually this is the aura in its entirety. The aura is not a thing that is spiritual only, that can be only seen by the spiritual people. It is a thing that exists for its own self. It exists as we understand in physics as the electromagnetic body of ourselves. That is the aura. Those are basically the core philosophies. Whatever you do to somebody else, you are doing to yourself. The next question is, what initiations are there for the Law of One? Basically none. You don't need any special initiations or group rituals or passage rituals to become part of the Law of One, but there are rituals that you can do that are perhaps advised for. There is the going into the darkness ritual, where you find one of these, for example a pyramid, and go into the Queen's chamber and lie down for several days. And there are similar things to which you can do to contact the spirits, but they are not really key components of the Law of One in and of themselves, but they are mentioned. So if you find, for example, a shamanistic initiation about the sauna, or sauna in Finnish, and you proceed to do a shamanistic initiation of one of these, I hate to call them primitive cultures, but let's say primitive cultures, and you do one of these initiations, you will do an initiation according to the Law of One. So basically an initiation can be something as simple as going to church. So there is no specific path to meditation or the specific path to religious unity. These are all paths because we are all one being, so we can't really say that there is a path that is not one of the initiation paths. So basically, if I had to say what is the most important initiation, it would be your entry into the fourth density while living, which is actually impossible because you have to be third density while living in the way that we understand life, because you at fourth density understand that all forms of life are you, and that is something that is incompatible with our society and our way of doing things, such as punishing for crimes instead of loving the criminal and the recipient of the crime equally. We can't do that in our current understanding. We have to do crime and punishment. So basically the initiation of death, where you become the next density, or you choose to recycle back to this density, as it is not a single path. You can choose to reincarnate into the third density forever. I should perhaps cover the density model, which is one of the core beliefs of the group. It reads that as you develop, you become a denser being, and your life becomes more in your control. The idea is that as you expand and your sense of love expands, your sense of self expands to regions that you couldn't reach even if you left Earth at the speed of light. So these regions respond to you by sending a message towards you before you basically start to advance towards them. So you get to the center point, so you can actually see these objects and interact with these objects even though they are outside of your light cone, or what you would call the ability to travel at the speed of light. So as you advance, you enlarge your bubble, and through that enlarging you become more dense. There is more matter in you, and eventually you become basically larger than the universe, and the matter in you is more denser than the universe itself, even if it were compressed into a single black hole. So you become more dense than a black hole. You become the ultimate black hole. You become the white hole. So that is what the density model says you will evolve into. First density is all inanimate life, and as it becomes alive in the way that we understand and generates the veil, it becomes second density. In the second density is all plant and animal life. So as soon as the animal life becomes self-aware in the primitive sense of understanding that it needs to interact with other selves, it becomes third density. As soon as the third density life understands that it needs to either seek love or light, it becomes fourth density. Once it graduates into a point where it needs to have its entire society with it, that it needs to be unified of one mind with everyone, it becomes fifth density. Once it becomes fifth density, it becomes essentially entirely spirit or entirely energy, or what you would call an angel type civilization. It is harmonious in its energy. Everything it does is of one mind, and as soon as that thing has experienced all that it wants to experience, it starts to experience the things that are less important to it, that are of the opposite path, and then it eventually becomes sixth density. Sixth density creatures try to unify the path of light and love. They try to understand and love everything equally. And as soon as that is done, it advances into the seventh density, where life ends. It exists in a timeless state, but it still exists, so it doesn't end in the way that you would understand, in that it is unfindable, but it is no longer responsive. It just exists for its own sake. And at the eighth density, it starts to return back to the first density, which at the ninth density is once again the first density. That is the density model. So they don't use base 10 math, they use something else. So that is perhaps the law of one in its compressed short form. It is a belief that we are all one being that evolves out of its boredom to become many beings, and then back into the one being, and then back into the many beings. So it is the universe breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. That is the universe. So basically that is all I can say about the law of one. I'm going to ask if he has any more questions. How did law become of one? Nice question. How did God come into being? I'm waiting for him to respond, and I'll continue this until the 1 hour mark. The Hangover stun gun demonstration scene. That was brutal. Brutal. The West Wing, Lionel Tribby and his cricket bat, and it's surely to their credit. No more questions, but I'll do 10 minutes of funny YouTube videos. By the way, my official nickname here is Catnip. Lol, why? Because I used to smoke catnip from my bong and shared it with people here before I started smoking tobacco. Nice nickname, I think I'll tattoo it on my hornet helmet. Have one of those airborne nicknames, feels nice. Lol. Shish kebab. Man finds woman living in attic. Half happened. Incredibles 2 movie clip, Disney Pixar. Animated kids movie. Oh, those hips. Sniff. I'm gonna have to say something really lewd here. I wonder how big you'd have to be to satisfy Elastigirl. Moving on. So cute. Pretty bike. Nice bike. Small bike, that should answer my question. Giggity. That's free.